reform some of the criminal justice system, he did that as well. And so that work is just as important as something that he might have said back during the Central Park 5.
I acknowledge the First Step Act, but when you said he undid the 94 crime bill, what do you mean?
What I mean is that the reforms in the First Step Act undid in part some of the issues in the 94 crime bill. Not totally. Not totally. It dealt with the sentencing of those people who either had their sentences reduced or were released, and their convictions were in line with the 94 crime bill and the way criminal statutes were written under that piece of legislation.
And his thoughts on the whole Haitians eating.
Go ahead, Andrew, what's that?
Oh, what's up, Angela?
Sorry, just on this same point, you talked about taking the man in his totality.
Yeah.
So one of those things in his totality is what happened on January 6th, which was your first term in Congress.
Yeah.
Do you think he should be held accountable? Donald Trump should be held accountable for his role in the January 6th insurrection?
Well, I mean, listen, first of all, I would tell you that everybody's responsible for their own actions. Just like I'm not going to blame friends or blame anybody else for the things I've done wrong in my life, I'm not going to put that on him. I'm not going to run around and blame Bernie Sanders for the fact that Steve Scalise was shot. Because if you go back and look at when Steve Scalise, who's the current leader in the House of Representatives, who almost died at a congressional baseball practice. Hold on, let me explain this. So I'm going to come back to January 6th.
Yeah, please do.
No, I will, of course. The shooter that almost killed Steve Scalise, the Republican leader, he said vehemently that the reason why he went to the congressional baseball practice of Republicans to shoot it up was because he felt that Republicans were going to take away health care. And what he had heard in his rhetoric was that was dangerous, and these Republicans had to be stopped. So I'm going to translate that to January 6th. The shooter is the one that perpetrated that crime. I'm not going to put that on Bernie Sanders, who he cited for the rhetoric around why he went to the congressional baseball practice. And that's the shooter that almost killed Steve Scalise. Let me translate. Donald Trump authorized 10,000 National Guard troops. I'm on the Oversight Committee. He actually authorized 10,000 troops on January 4th, 2 days before January 6th, obviously. So if you're going to say that you incited an insurrection, then how are you also going to authorize 10,000 National Guard troops to be at the Capitol? Are you inciting or are you not? Because
listen, Byron Donaldson destroyed this lady. Listen, this is the crazy part. The man literally said, I am on the Oversight Committee. He is a part of Congress. He knows the ins and the outs of the details of what's actually transpiring in Congress. She doesn't know. Do you hear me? So again, why are you sitting up here trying to tell this man what's going on when he is on the inside? But listen, Nancy Pelosi said it was her fault because when Donald Trump authorized the 10,000 National Guard, she literally did not believe that they needed the National Guard at the Capitol. Then after the aftermath, after everything hits the wall, she wants to say, it's my fault. It's my fault. Here's the receipts.
We have responsibility, Terry. We did not have any accountability for what was going on there, and we should have. This is ridiculous. You're going to ask me in the middle of the thing when they've already breached the inaugural stuff that should we call the Capitol Police? I mean, the National Guard? Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with?
They thought that they had sufficient resources.
No, there's not a question of how they had been. They don't know. They clearly didn't know, and I take responsibility for not having them just prepare for more.
The record is he authorized the troops. Nancy Pelosi and Muriel Bowser, the mayor of D.C., did not want the troops at the Capitol. Muriel Bowser signed a letter on January 5th wanting the National Guard troops to be on traffic duty in D.C. Now, here's the funny thing about January 5th, 2021, is that nobody was in D.C. because D.C.'s rules around COVID-19 had the entire city shut down. The streets were empty during this time. So the National Guard that was authorized by Donald Trump were on traffic duty when there was no traffic, when they could have been at the Capitol. That's the history of January 6th. So your question is, well, did he incite a riot? Well, I never seen somebody incite a riot.
What I said, and I just, because I know,
I don't want to cut you off. I'm going to make one point. I don't want to cut you off.
No, but I want to make sure that you're addressing the right point, because I actually did not use that language. What I asked you was, should Donald Trump be held accountable for his role in January 6th? And so what I think is important is to compare this to Steve Scalise being shot after someone wanted health care versus the rhetoric, the very dangerous rhetoric that Donald Trump spouted on January 6th.
To demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Where more than 1,200 people have been charged in nearly all 50 states for their role, and 140 police officers were assaulted. The same police officers that your party has said they want qualified immunity for, and Donald Trump, because we're looking at the total police accountability, and I used examples of why they should be held accountable. But you talked about how fantastic he was with the crime bill, which I object, but I'll let you finish your point.
Fair.
You also have not acknowledged the fact that this man was vehemently opposed to the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and you all are.
This woman is so disingenuous. She got clowned and schooled all across the board while reading on her laptop. He was speaking from intellect and knowledge, the things that he has literally studied. She hasn't studied anything. She's Googling the entire time. She's reading articles from biased sources the entire time. While this man who is educated is informing her on the very things that she has no knowledge about. And she has the audacity and the gall not to listen to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. Now, we already debunked January 6th. Y'all see the proof. Y'all see the receipts. We already debunked that Donald Trump incited the riot. He already knew the people were going to go. He had already told them, hey, we need the National Guard there. They disregarded that. So seeing that they were going to go anyway, he came and gave a speech. He said, y'all, we know y'all going, but if y'all going to go peacefully and patriotically. Where was the violent rhetoric that she accused him of? Okay, let me ask one more time. Where was the violent rhetoric that she accused of Donald Trump of having? Then, when she see that she's wrong, she wants to bring up the Capitol Police not being able to do their job because of qualified immunity. She thought she was smart. That's why Byron Donaldson said, hey, you done conflated so many different issues in your one narrative that you were trying to present to me to try to prove your point, which I've already debunked. Now you want to try to confuse me. But then when I try to bring clarity to the people and the viewers that are watching, you want to sit up here and tell me, no, answer this. No, I cannot answer this unless I deal with the totality of the question. Makes sense, right? Then she want to bring up George Floyd and Tamir Rice and all these different incidents that happen that has nothing to do with the actual conversation of January 6th. And then only an emotional, unintelligent individual would not see what Angela Rott was trying to pull. But when you have common sense already lets you know that you can compartmentalize, dissect, do extensive research for yourself, and understand that Tamir Rice had nothing to do with January 6th. George Floyd had nothing to do with January 6th. And all these things that she's trying to present in her argument has nothing to do with January 6th, y'all. And I've already proved the January 6th aspect of the entire conversation. Let's keep going.
Supposed to be the party that protects law enforcement, where over 150 police officers were assaulted that day on January 6th because of Donald Trump's rhetoric.
So let me respond to a couple things. Number one, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. There were actually two bills that were moving through the United States Senate that year. There was the George Floyd Policing Act that you discussed, and there was the bill that was written by Senator Tim Scott. They were both moving. They're both moving through the Senate, right? The Tim Scott bill is the one that could have got signed into law. It was essentially a mirror image of the George Floyd bill, except for qualified immunity. The difference between those two bills, and Angela, you just acknowledged it, the only difference between those two bills was qualified immunity. The issue with qualified immunity is very simple. If you remove qualified immunity from policing, you're going to have less officers on the street. Police officers make what? $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year? They have, most law enforcement has about 40 million.
And this is the funny part. all these people talking about qualified immunity that have an issue with qualified immunity are the same people that if a crime transpired in their house or to their loved ones, they're going to call the police. So listen, for all you women who believe in that officers should not have qualified immunity, don't call the police. Ever. Don't ever call the police. Byron Donaldson is extensively telling you what's going on with qualified immunity. Donald Trump has explained it. You can actually do what she's doing, pull up Google, and see that qualified immunity is civil and it is not criminal. If an officer commits a crime and is judged by the jury of his peers based on the people that y'all, the judges that y'all put in office, based on the people that show up for jury duty that actually become jurors, which are the people who actually say whether somebody's guilty and non-guilty, because you're judged by the jury of your peers. You can't get mad at nobody but yourself, because half of y'all don't even show up for jury duty or answer the jury summons. Let's keep going.
Million or more encounters every single year with citizens. If you remove qualified immunity, I'm telling you this right now because I've talked with law enforcement officers all across the country, not the chiefs, the officers. They will not be working these communities. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I'm from Crown Heights, Brooklyn. I may not have always loved having the police in my neighborhood, and that's just a thing from a kid. I may not have always loved it, but when I needed them, they were there. And a lot of our officers today, they're black, they're Hispanic, they're white. So removing qualified immunity only lowers the number of officers in communities. What we're seeing right now is a movement of policing from states where they're not really respecting law enforcement to states where they do, or there's not that moral support for law enforcement. I was in my district yesterday. I was talking with an officer who's from Philadelphia. He was a Philadelphia officer. He now is a Fort Myers officer. I asked him, I was like, well, why'd you make the move? He goes, because up there was no support for me as an officer for what I love to do, which is serve my community. So I said, enough is enough. I'm gonna move. He went to Florida. My sheriff in Florida, he's like, I have more applications coming from officers who are in states or in localities where they're not getting the moral support or whatever they need to continue to do their job day in, day out. And so they're leaving. Well, who does that hurt? That hurts. Who does that really hurt, though, Charlamagne? Yeah, because if you don't have officers if you don't have officers on the streets or officers, in urban areas, who's really left in that lurch?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what does qualified immunity have to do with having less police officers?
Because the economic incentive of qualified immunity means that your personal assets aren't gone after if something goes wrong. So, you're in business. Do you get involved in a project or a deal that leaves you massively exposed financially? You may, depending on your passion for that project, but then you also sit back and think, now, wait a minute, if something goes wrong, I'm going to be held massively liable. Maybe I need to do something.
When something goes wrong, we're talking about people getting violently hurt or killed.
Yeah, clearly.
When it's people that you brushed over.
But it's clear when somebody clearly violates a constitutional right.
And when you violate a constitutional right, qualified immunity doesn't apply to you. And that's what I'm talking about. It does not. And Angela, don't do that. It does not. I thought that was the definition. No, it does not. I thought that was the definition. No, it does not. If you carry yourself outside of the confines of your training and the protocols of that department, qualified immunity doesn't apply to you. It does not.
That's not true.
That is very true. That is very true.
That is patently false.
It's patently true, and we need to make sure we have that accurate. We cannot make that statement because you have a lot of officers out here who do their job with honor and dignity and respect for the people that they serve.
Listen, qualified immunity is a legal doctrine that protects government officials from civil lawsuits when they perform their jobs unless they clearly violate a constitutional right.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And what is a violation of that right is when they're outside the norms of their training and the protocols of that department or that agency.
But here's the main thing, because we can actually go past qualified immunity because this is the place where you've refused to answer both on Donald Trump's accountability and on the law enforcement that you love so dearly.
Right.
What we know is that he's seeking full immunity, like the same immunity he now has because of the Supreme Court. Because of the corruption of the Supreme Court, we have now gone beyond civil presidential immunity to criminal presidential immunity. He would like to give that same immunity to law enforcement. True or false?
Well, let's expand that a couple
True
things.
or false?
You can't ask a true or
because
false, Angela,
this
because
is
you
a
got to
very
explain the
simple-
details. No, see, this is the
I
problem.
don't want you to explain the details because when you explain
Why you
the
don't
details,
want people to
you end
hear
up
the
down the road
details,
and
Angela? The
fact.
details are what the things that matter. You
What
got to
I would
explain the
like for you to
details,
do
or
is
then you just
answer
talk. You're
true
just
or false,
talking.
and then explain.
If
Can
you
do that?
don't explain the details, then you're just talking.
Yeah, you don't want to say that because you know that it's not true. So
That
let's
is
just
not
move
true.
along.
You want a true or false statement.
Congressman, I want to know if
I don't
you've
want to
ever
argue with you. I want to explain the
experienced
facts.
racism in this country.
Angela, I don't want to argue with you.
I would
wanna
like to
explain
know
the
if you've ever
facts.
experienced racism in this country, Congressman.
Yeah, actually, I have.
Y'all see how she keep changing the topic? This man is literally destroying her. She doesn't want the facts that are presented. She doesn't want the truth. She wants to spew rhetoric, create a narrative to get people emotional, to have people thinking negatively about Donald Trump, but she doesn't want to hear the substantial facts that can be proven. This was a masterclass schooling. Byron Donaldson destroyed this lady. Breakfast Club, y'all should never bring her back. And Tez and Figaro, please don't ever bring her back. These women y'all bringing on this platform biased and they're not qualified. Breakfast Club, y'all need to stop this. You seen why Envy and Charlamagne were basically quiet the entire time. The man knew his facts. Not only that, he brought receipts. He said, Charlamagne, read this. Okay? So make it make sense. Make it make sense.